and the whole thing is I had a school teacher before that I was friends with. She worked for the government schools, and she was a school teacher, and she actually pulled her kids out and she actually unschooled them. Oh, wow. And she said that trying to be a teacher in the public school system and have a love of learning and really want to teach and want to instill a love of learning into your students, she said trying to do that in the public school system is like trying to be an Olympic swimmer and swim with handcuffs on. She's like, you cannot do it. It's impossible.
Hello my friends, thank you for clicking on today's video. Today's video is going to be all about the attendance crisis at the public schools. You might be saying, what? I haven't heard anything about this, so if you haven't heard anything, or maybe if you have, we're going to be reacting to 3 videos we wanted to sit down and let y'all listen in to as well.
But before we do, we just want to say thank you all so much for joining us. We know that there's a lot of new subscribers here. Welcome. We are so honored that you would join our YouTube family and just be part of this wonderful community that we have here online. If you haven't already, please go check out our little farm shop called TheTexasBoys.com. The kids run that, and we just really enjoy supporting the kids in that whole endeavor, as well as on their YouTube channel here. So the farm shop is just a really great way where you can go buy a t-shirt or buy something for yourself, and also in doing so support the kids and what they're doing here. They just pour all of their heart, soul, and time into putting out good content for y'all and running the farm and doing all the things. So without further ado, let's jump in. Let's start watching these really awesome videos.
Yeah. So the first video is from Project Veritas. So this video is the highlights of James O'Keefe and Megyn Kelly. Let's get started.
Okay, and for those of you who don't know, Project Veritas, we love everything that he puts out. James O'Keefe does just a tremendous job of documenting a lot of things that go on across the country. Yeah. So he just put together a new project here recently, and it's called The Secret Curriculum. So you might want to check that out. We will link all of these videos for you below. Yeah. So here we go.
But we begin today with James O'Keefe. Very excited to have James here. Well, he's out today with a new video exposing yet another teacher/administrator pushing a left-wing agenda on students and proudly boasting that if a teaching candidate shows any hint that he or she might be a conservative, they won't be hired.
Hi, Megyn. Great to be with you.
It's great to have you back. And, I said yesterday how much I appreciate these videos. As a mother with 3 young kids in school, I just, it's one thing to know these teachers are biased and these schools are left leaning. It's quite another to see the admissions on camera. Why educators?
Well, we did a story a year ago on a teacher named Gabrielle Gipe in Sacramento, and that was just an absolute firestorm. Parents flooded the board meeting in Sacramento. This is 1 year ago last week. And these are not Republican or Democrat necessarily people. These are just angry mothers. You don't mess with a mother's children. And this tape a year ago showed a self-described communist anarchist say he wants to F with your kids. He wants to give extra credit to go to Antifa rallies. So we dispatched our undercover journalists in the field and ran into these teachers in Fairfield County, Connecticut, and New York City, exposing what they really felt and what they really were doing. The evidence is incontrovertible. You could hear Jeremy Boland's voice. You could see his face. And you could even hear the reporter asking the question in that restaurant in Stamford, Connecticut, when he talked about not hiring people over the age of 30, which is what's causing this attorney general to launch a civil rights investigation. And this is not a political.
Okay, so let's just stop and back up for just a second. So these school teachers these liberal-minded school teachers are encouraging their students and saying they will give them extra credit in class if they will go to Antifa rallies and, really put their life in danger. Come on, guys, the stuff that goes on at those Antifa rallies, and just push this liberal agenda. And then he brings up the other point. James O'Keefe says that the schools are also admitting that they don't want to hire anybody over the age of 30 years old. So you say, why? Why do you think that the school systems would not want to be hiring people over the age of 30? Why do you think, Matt?
If I had to guess why they don't want any old people in there, is because they don't want, old timers. They just have they grew up with good morals, and, we're surrounded with really good people, and they're not these crazy people that just have absolutely no idea what in the world they're talking about. They don't even know who they even are. They're not like, they haven't just got out of the brainwashing colleges and are going straight into teaching these young children that are just trying to get around in life, and they're developing, and then they're pushing all this on them. So then they're like, well, I want to excel really good. I want to excel in life, so I guess I'm going to have to go to these Antifa rallies so then I can get a higher more credits or whatever, and it's just absolutely insanity.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Yes, that is exactly right. So if they hire people over the age of 30, there's probably a much more likely chance that those people are going to have something called common sense, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to know the difference between boys and girls. They're going to probably come to the table with a lot more life experience. They're probably going to have children themselves, so they're going to have a lot more experience and discretion and judgment in life, and just a lot more balanced views probably in general than a young kid coming out of college, like you said, exactly, fresh out of college, not a whole lot of life experience, have just been pumped and taught all of this stuff from these liberal-minded professors. And I know my husband and I can totally speak from experience that the colleges back 20 some years ago were entrenched with liberalism. I mean, there was just not a conservative professor to be found, and they were just brainwashing you with this stuff. And young people are just, you look up to these people. Of course, the students in the schools, in the public schools, look up to their teachers, especially if they're young teachers. They're cool. They know all the things. And what does mom and dad know? They're kind of lame and old, in the dinosaur ages and whatever. So, they really have a lot of influence. The teachers have a lot of influence, and they know that. We're going to go back into it.
It's not a political expose. That's why we chose this story, because I think these stories are bringing people together.
But the underlying problem, yes, you've exposed illegality for sure. You cannot discriminate against people because of their age or their religion. That's very clear. But the underlying threat is because of their conservatism. That's what that guy is trying to weed out. And that is why you're meeting with resistance, because these liberals who are on that teacher's or that administrator's side of the aisle want to protect him and agree with his approach. That's what's so outrageous about it. The fact that you got 2 admissions of actually breaking the law is the only thing that's made anybody above that guy in the totem pole listen. Otherwise, they'd be backing him. They'd find some way to back him because they support his approach. It's what's so infuriating when you're in this school system as somebody who is not far left.
The second official at the private school in New York City has also been put on leave as a result of our investigation. Good.
The one who wants Dexter, a serial killer,
Correct.
To come in and take out all the white boys. Yeah, she's definitely going to be suspended and fired. Or I will personally take my little placard and go march in front of Trinity School, which I know exactly where it is. It's very close to where we used to live. And it's considered truly one of the best, if not the best, private school in the country. Think about it this way. Think about it if Jennifer Norris had said, unfortunately, it's the black boys who feel very entitled to express their opposite opinions and push back. There's a huge contingent of them that are just like horrible. And you're like, you always going to be horrible, or you're just going to be horrible right now? The question, is there any saving these, change it, Democrat black guys? I don't know. I think they need to go. They're really awful people. That's what I'm afraid of with my black students that are poor. I'm like, do you ever have to deal with these problems? They're so protected. It makes me sad. We need to find some like Dexter, sort of like a vigilante to take people out, in particular, the black boys. She would be fired within 2 seconds of your videotape hitting air. The fact that these kids are white and boys has somehow shielded her from immediate termination. And it's wrong. It's like this, as soon as I got wind of the fact that this is how my school was effectively looking at my boys, and just again, for people who don't know, but the final straw was I found out that they wanted it to be mandatory reading amongst the faculty. They were circulating this piece by some academic professor at another institution in which this person argued that in every classroom where white children learn, there is a future killer cop. And they wanted my 6-year-old's first grade teacher to be aware of what they considered this fact, that I guess in my 6-year-old boy's classroom, there was a future killer cop. And I thought to myself, oh, who is it? My boy? Is it my sweet Thatcher? Is it his little buddies who he hangs out with and does Foursquare with and plays baseball with? Are those the future killer cops? Show me, which one is it? How should the teacher be treating them? But that's the ideology. This is how they're looking. She's looking at these white kids who probably haven't said anything to her, walking down the hall thinking, we need a vigilante. You're horrible. You need to go. There's no saving you. She has to be fired, or I'm literally getting a placard and marching in front of Trinity myself.
I'm looking forward
I will
to.
do it.
I think there is a protest, Megan, in front of Trinity today. I think there are people there, and
Yeah, I mean, what is going to be the last straw? I mean, getting a placard and marching in front of a school, I mean, I think time's up, too late, game over.
Yeah.
Guys, pull them out. I know we've had friends that have just said this year, pull them out. They lost it. They've lost their minds on 99 different levels. We can talk about all of the different levels of they're totally incompetent. They're totally negligent, and they're totally incompetent. They're totally negligent, and they're totally pushing this liberal hate speech. I mean, to say that you want 6-year-old little boys to die because they're white, and you feel like they have some type of privileged life or some type of chance of becoming like a murderer or something just because of the color of their skin. This is insane. Like, this is total insanity. Game over, all done, rack me, I'm out. I would have my kids out of there so fast. This isn't special to this particular school, guys. This is
it's all of them.
Nationwide.
It's all of them.
This is bad. This is systemic. This is all across the nation. It's coming from our higher education system. It's coming from our colleges. And this has been pushed so hard for the past, I don't know, at least 25 years, 30 years that we know of personally. It's been this way, and now it's pervasive. It is the norm, and I hear it from friends of ours who have their kids in public schools and in private like charter schools and stuff. The things that these kids have to endure just to go to school is it's absolutely horrendous. And I mean, I could tell you horror story after horror story. I'm sure you know them too. I mean, I have a neighbor right up the road that about a year ago, she stopped and she said, "Do you all homeschool your kids?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I'm about to pull my daughter out." And I said, "Why?" And she said she is just having the most horrible time. Now, these are little, small country schools here. And she said she is so stressed about being in school that she's literally physically like created this habit of pulling her hair out of her head. She's like losing her hair and she's like pulling it out of her head. It's like a stress mechanism thing because she just hates being in there so much. Just the pressure, the bullying, just the big system that is like this machine that you're in. It's not a healthy atmosphere.
No.
At all in any way. You don't feel safe.
Nope.
You don't feel physically safe. You don't feel mentally safe. I mean, there's just this whole disconnect. It's nothing like most children's home life or parenting.
No.
Everything's being undermined. You got anything to add to that?
I never in a million years could ever imagine like even going to public school or what that would be like. Every public schooler that I've ever met, and like everybody's like, oh, you know, they always talk about like social and like homeschoolers being social. All I know is every public schooler that I've met has been the least social person. I'm talking about kids anyway, I'm not talking about adults, but I'm talking just about kids. They're the most quietest and the most try to keep very low profile, stare at their phone. Even if you're kind of in the room with them, they really don't want to interact at all. Unlike homeschoolers, which will, you know, it all depends if you're introvert or extrovert or whatever. But they're just more, I don't know, more aware of things and everything like that. But yeah, I absolutely, I would probably actually get kicked out of a public school if I went in there anyway. So I would offend too many people.
Well, I guess just based on the color of your skin, you would offend them at this
so I
point.
wouldn't even have to say anything. All right, so that is the end of that video. You can watch the whole length video down in the description down below. Since we have 2 other videos that we are going to be watching, we had to skip through that video a little bit, but you can, like I said, watch that video in its entirety in the description down below.
Yes, and that's just one systemic problem
Yes.
that we wanted to put out there for y'all to kind of chew on and think about while we go into these next 2 videos, which are going to be a direct result of some of these systemic problems that we're seeing in the public school systems nationwide. So here we go. We're going to jump into it. First one is local to our state, Texas, and then we're going to do one that is going to be nationwide. Again, we're going to get there. Okay, so the first one's going to be local to our state, our home state of Texas. The second video will be covering the whole country and the attendance crisis that's going on in the whole country right now. So let's go jump into Texas, and this is Central Texas Public Schools see enrollment decline and funding problems, right?
Oh.
Okay, all right.
Population of Central Texas continues to grow. The KV Defenders found public school districts across the area are seeing fewer children in classrooms, and parents are taking those kids' education into their own hands.
Good.
It could cause real problems for funding these schools. Here's KVU's Terry Gruca.
Class time looks a lot different this year for so many families.
Why don't you go ahead and get your math book out?
Here at the Barbie house, where the playroom is now a classroom for all 4 kids, home is school.
Why don't you work right here?
The decision to homeschool wasn't easy.
But we just felt it was the right thing to do, schedule-wise. I couldn't imagine having to keep up with the schedule of virtual. I felt like doing things in our timing was better when you've got multiple kids.
At first, it was even harder on the kids who were attending school.
Well, I personally know firsthand, I had a family member come down and visit us, and it was during the Rona, and she had the public school program, but online version. She was on that thing literally 24/7. She would wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it didn't help that she was in a different time zone though.
Right.
So, you know, her normal time zone we were like an hour behind, so she had to get up at 5. So she had to get up at 5, and she normally would go to bed around 12 o'clock at night, sometimes a little bit later, and the whole time she was down, she might have went outside twice in like a week or 2 that she was down here.
She was here for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
She went on a walk with you once.
Once, yeah.
And We did get to go to church together, and that's pretty much it.
That was it.
I think.
And then even on Sundays, she was doing all this homeschool stuff. And I think at least how it was looking anyway, is that they were trying to make the kids' lives miserable at home.
Yes.
So then they were wanting to get back to the schools.
Yeah.
So then they wouldn't be like, oh, this is awesome. I can do my schoolwork at home.
Right.
Dude, I'll just stay at home and do public school or just be homeschooled.
Right.
So I think they were just trying to torture the kids.
Right.
That's just my opinion.
Yes.
But I think they were just trying to torture them and make their life miserable and add so much more junk to it. And all the stuff that she was doing was absolute nonsense. I promise you it's not going to get her anywhere in life, any of that garbage that she's learning. And it was just absolutely terrible. And I was like...
And she couldn't interact with the family
Yeah,
at
she
all.
couldn't.
The
And the
whole
one
time we had to like
time-
set her
yeah.
up in her own little
Yep.
space. And she had her headphones on and everything. And she just couldn't be a part of anything.
Yeah.
Like I brought her her breakfast. I would brought her her lunch.
Yeah.
You know, I would say, do you want me to get you a cup of tea? But I couldn't like interact or like
No, because it was
interfere
like
with-
live classes and everything.
Yeah.
It was so dumb. And then the other thing too was like the 2 times that she did actually go outside and like, you know, we gave her a tour of the farm and everything like that is because the internet went out. So other than that, that was the only reason that she actually went outside or anything like that.
So sad.
And
So sad. Even to the point, like they had like this virtual gym class.
So dumb.
So she just had to like go
take
online
a photo
and
of herself doing something.
Yeah,
It's like that is the most dumbest thing I've ever seen.
Or just screenshot like a exercise video
Yeah.
or something,
Oh, so
and then
dumb.
that counted to report it. Yeah, it was total nonsense. And
It's so dumb.
I know from other family members as well, a close family of mine that had children that homeschooled during that year, like forced homeschool. But I
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
said that is not homeschool.
No.
Like she
No.
and she had the
Oh my
same
Lord.
complaints. Was like, they're here, like physically they're here, they're home, but they're stuck doing hours and hours and hours of this total nonsense. And the person that was telling me this was also a school teacher, and she was like, I know 100%, like for a fact, this is total nonsense. Like they don't do this much stuff when they're
No.
normally in school. Like
Yeah.
this is just to save face, just so the parents think that like, oh, they're really doing all this stuff, and they aren't really doing all of that much work. But it was just a miserable experience. And I mean, there was so many times that I recommended to people like, just stop. Like, just tell them you're done. Tell them you're homeschooling. Tell them, I mean, the whole summer was wasted. It was just
it
a
was garbage.
joke. It was total horribleness. So when she says, I'd rather do our own homeschool and have our own schedule than to try to follow some online, set thing from a public school. I totally get that, because that is enslavement to the public school system. That is nothing. There's nothing similar in homeschooling and having full liberty and freedom to learn how you want, teach your children how you want, and be flexible. That is total opposite of doing the online public school. That's its own separate, totally separate, different. But I love this family. I love their enthusiasm. Beautiful family. This is just great. I just love all of this.
Attending school in Round Rock ISD.
I was the one who was bummed the most. I was like devastated. I was so upset.
Noelle and Stacy Barbie are products of public schools themselves. But with a 5, 9, 10, and 12-year-old, homeschooling was their best option.
But day by day, we're going to make the best decision
For our
family.
The Barbies aren't alone. Round Rock ISD has 2,500 fewer students than last year.
Good.
That's a very real concern. In Round Rock ISD,
No, that's
the
awesome.
students we've lost, that translates to a $13 million budget deficit.
That's great.
It translates to money. It's a money wheel.
Not like, oh yeah, that's so sad. Those kids aren't going to get to learn whatever.
It translates to dollars. They are using your children for money. That is what this is all about. That's the whole game.
Yep.
There's another really awesome documentary. I'll try to find it. Maybe we'll cover it on a future video, but it talks about the whole money wheel of the public school system. think government, think money wheel, and about 80% of the money that is spent in the public school system is not spent on the children. It's spent on infrastructure. It's spent on employee salaries and real high up salaries and all of this extra junk and just adults. It's spent on a money wheel, a money racket. It's not spent on the children.
The largest school district, Austin ISD, has seen the greatest decline. In fact, for years, Austin ISD has been losing students as families move out of the city.
Good.
But this school year, AISD has recorded its biggest drop in enrollment ever, down 5,600 students.
That's
then
great.
there are the areas with growing suburban populations, like Leander, where enrollment is also down. 1,100 fewer students this year at Leander ISD.
Public schools are generally funded by states on a per-student basis, and school districts must submit an official enrollment count, typically in October, to determine their funding for the next year. The Texas Education Agency agreed to extend funding to public schools through the end of 2020, which keeps school funding at last year's levels. But the big concern now is what happens after December.
Like most area school districts, 80% of Round Rock ISD's budget goes to personnel. And even though the district
80% goes to
There you
personnel, so not to the kids. And the big concern is if they can't get these kids to come back to school, their money wheel is going to fall apart. And I say, good riddance. Absolutely, you had it coming to you, and I'm sorry it took so long that these parents can wake up and get their kids out of that nonsense. They have no personal safety. You're attacking their morals, our values. Any type of conservative person is going to be totally bullied and picked on in that kind of situation. If you're conservative in any aspect of your life at all,
if you're a certain color, you'll be.
If you're a certain color, you're going to be totally discriminated against.
Terrible.
And
just
I mean,
wicked.
it's not a good atmosphere at all.
Though the district operates with a surplus, no one knows when all the students will return. So there's a real possibility of cuts.
We're going to have issues as students are going to return. And if we've had to make staffing changes and then they return,
come on.
It's just a disruption. And we also...
It's a disruption. They don't have people waiting at the door to go get a job.
And we also know that when students return, we're going to have a COVID learning slide to deal with. And that means intervention. And that means...
The COVID learning slide is going to be that these kids aren't going to be testing at the same state level testing, and the whole thing is I had a school teacher before that I was friends with. She worked for the government schools, and she was a school teacher, and she actually pulled her kids out and she actually unschooled them. And she said that trying to be a teacher in the public school system and have a love of learning and really want to teach and want to instill a love of learning into your students. She said trying to do that in the public school system is like trying to be an Olympic swimmer and swim with handcuffs on. She's like, you cannot do it. It's impossible. She's like, they don't care what these kids learn. They don't care what you teach them. All they care about is the test results. They want those state test results at the end of the year. They want those test results to show a certain thing. And as long as they show that they've done these state testing things and those kids can pass those state tests, that's all they want, because that's where they get their funding from. And the rest does not matter, to the point that where we came from, they had stopped teaching a lot of the different major subjects, and they were only teaching to the state test. And that's exactly what she said. She said it was nonsense. She said all they're doing is spending all year long teaching these kids to pass state tests at the end of the year. And it was just totally nonsense. It was this new math that made no sense to anybody, and just they stopped teaching history, stopped teaching science, stopped teaching art, anything else extracurricular was totally out of the picture. It was just math, reading, writing, and just getting them to pass these tests, and it's just wicked. Nonsense, total nonsense. So that's the learning curve that she's talking about.
more resources.
As for whether the Barbies' decision hurts Round Rock ISD, where their children attended,
Good.
It's a good question.
I mean, it's a question that we haven't really considered because we're doing what's the best for our family.
the learning curve is great, even for families like the Barbies that have had the luxury of working and schooling from home. But they also know they're not alone.
Actually, in our inner circle, we know 5 families that are homeschooling their kids. At least 16 kids I know that's just in our inner circle that's homeschooling our kids.
It's hard to ignore the newfound freedom and flexibility schooling from home has brought many families like theirs. 12-year-old Jeremiah, who dreaded the decision to homeschool at first, has found his niche.
This week's gonna be an amazing week.
On top of his schoolwork, he's now creating weekly news broadcasts from home.
It's just my favorite part of history.
And the homeschool environment has brought out so much the Barbie family didn't expect.
I got my 12-year-old helping the littles, and it's, for me, that's been really cool, is for all of them to help each other. So that's been surprising for me, is it's not just about me being the teacher, it's all of us doing it together.
Okay, go ahead. Do you want to comment on this little boy who's just so adorable and so passionate?
Yeah, I just think that's pretty awesome that, you know, that they can come out of such a materialistic and such a fabricated type of system and then just be given this absolute freedom that you have with homeschooling. And I think people that come out of it too do have a appreciation for it as well. I know it is harder. I think it is better if you can pull out your kids when they are younger, so then they don't have, so then they just don't get in a rut with things and they don't just get in the groove with everything, and then they're like, oh, well, you know, that would just mess up my flow if I stop doing the same old thing every day, you know. You do have some growing pains when coming out of that, I have to imagine. But once you do fully come out of that and you can experience the freedom, it's just absolutely amazing. Yeah, I totally recommend it. And and if you think your kids aren't going to get enough social stuff, that is absolute garbage. If you have a pickup truck, if you have a minivan, let them drive it around and talk to the neighbors around your area, and they'll have enough social stuff to keep them busy for a lifetime. I will tell you that right now. And that's what us kids do. Whenever we see new neighbors move in, we'll either walk down, drive down, somehow we'll get over there and introduce ourselves and say hi and make ourselves known over there. Maybe even give them a welcoming gift. But it's just...
Absolutely. I think, you know, homeschooling creates this real sense of community that you really do have. And that's no matter where you're at. Probably if you were public schooled like me and my husband were, you really kind of were unplugged from your community, from your real community. You thought that your community was going to this artificial community that was school, that was the building that you were in, and that's the people that you were around, and that became your artificial sense of what your community was. But really outside of that, you really weren't plugged in. I mean, if you did sports, it was still within the confines of that system. So,
and that's why when they think about leaving that, they're like, well, there's no community around me.
Sure.
But they don't actually know if they weren't in that artificial community, they would actually be exposed to the real community around them.
Yes, so they would be going to the stores with their mom and dads, going shopping, going grocery shopping every week. You get to meet people, right? You run around, you do all the errands, you learn who people are, you go to the library, go hang out at the library. You're bound to meet some homeschoolers.
Oh, yeah,
go hang out if you still have a Y around, a YMCA around, or somewhere like that has like an indoor swimming facility. Go sign your kids up for some swim lessons. You're bound to meet some homeschoolers. Go online, look around for some homeschool groups. You're bound to meet some homeschoolers. Sign up. There's all kinds of classes and things going on. I know before, when my children, my first 3 were younger and we didn't live so much in the country. I had them signed up for like this marine biology class and learned all these different things about marine life. And they had classes like once a month, and all these kids would get together and they would learn about different animals. And I mean, you just have to put a little time, put a little effort into it, and you will find all of these wonderful resources. There's so many clubs and things and just wonderful things to do to get your kids into. If you do like the sports stuff and you are still in a neighborhood, there's still sports, there's still things. You know, Matt did soccer with the township, then he did indoor soccer for a little while, swimming, guitar lessons. There's just so many different things that you can do. You are not limited in any way. If anything, you have more opportunities.
Alrighty, so that is the end of that video. So we are going on to video number 3. This is the last video. So this video is going to be pretty much covering the public school enrollment dropping for the whole entire country.
So here we go. It's just 2 minutes. Real quick.
Some school districts will begin the school year wondering, where is everybody?
Good.
At least in Illinois, I know many other states, less kids means less resources coming to your district.
Enrollment is down for public elementary schools.
Good.
An analysis of last year's enrollment by AP and Chalkbeat finds 1 in 3 Chicago schools now have fewer than 300 students.
Awesome.
LA, New York, and Boston are seeing similar trends of empty desks. Shrinking enrollment may force some districts in places like Denver, Indianapolis, and Kansas City, Missouri to close schools entirely. The Dickinson family in Wheaton, Illinois says,
if they start shutting down schools, you know what that does to our taxes, right? Makes them come down.
That's right.
And I think everyone would be happy if our taxes went down. I don't think there's a lot of people in this world that are like, man, I wish our taxes would go up this month.
And I think it's funny that they're so concerned about enrollment, but it's always tied to the money. It's not really tied to the student and their concern for their student. It's tied to money, and then it's tied to they might get behind and they might not test as good on their state testing, which is tied to the money again. So
because if they don't have enough enrollments going into that school, you know, they're going to have to shut down.
And hey, maybe it's game over for the public school. Maybe we're going to have such a big homeschool movement across this country, sweeping across this country, that these public schools, some of these public schools are going to be forced to close their doors. They're not going to have the funding, and good riddance. The kids are better off at home with their family, with their parents who love them, who can raise them, who can navigate around and find other systems, find other people to help take care of them. You can work it out. You can do homeschool at night. You can do it.
Go sell crazy somewhere else.
That's exactly right. They've been selling crazy for a long time.
Way too long.
And it caught up to them.
He says they were hesitant to pull their daughter out of school.
The idea of taking Caroline out of school was frightening, but the idea of keeping her in the school the way it was going with the just lack of, what's the wording? The lack of communication, consistency. The way it was run, it was just like months wasted.
They started homeschooling when the pandemic hit. Now they want to stick with it.
It's been consistent, it's been rigorous, she's excelled.
While the pandemic may have contributed to the decline of traditional public school enrollment, there's more to this story.
COVID has had an impact in some places, but those are micro impacts compared to the fact that we just, as a country, have a lot less babies that are growing up to be students.
Kids First Chicago has studied this.
So population is also presenting an issue. Oh, it's coming back to bite them. Nobody's having enough babies. So now their public money wheel is going down the tubes.
The toilet.
Interesting. And lack of communication. Yeah, it always creeped me out that there's these buildings that you go to, you drop your child off at the front door, and by the way, you're not allowed to just come in and check on your child
seriously?
At any time. No, you can't go. A parent cannot enter into a public school building unless you go to the office, you have to tell them who you are, you have to sign in and all that. And I understand security, of course.
That's why, no school shootings ever happen.
Beyond that, you are not allowed out of that main office. You are not allowed down the hallway. You're not allowed into the classroom unless if you have some special given permission and it's some exception to the rule. Your child is turned over to
because they don't want you to see what's actually going on in there.
Absolutely.
That's why.
Absolutely.
The school slowdown. They say, particularly in Chicago, enrollment declines are driven by the slowing growth of Latino families and a steady exodus of Black families out of the city. Another contributing factor, kids just aren't showing up because of quarantines or other causes. 50% of students in LA were considered chronically absent.
So chronic absenteeism has at least doubled nationwide. In some places.
So absenteeism has at least doubled nationwide. This is a big problem, guys. This is a monumental problem. And they're saying one of the other problems is that Black families are moving out of the cities and moving into the country. I say, wonderful. Awesome. Amen. Hallelujah. Welcome to the country. Maybe they're homesteading. Maybe they just want to live a country life. I think that is wonderful. I think that is not a problem at all. I think that is a wonderful thing that people are choosing to leave cities, no matter what color they are, that they're choosing to uproot their family, leave the city, and go live more rural lives. I think that's awesome. Wonderful. Latino families are having less children. Hey, everybody's having less children. That is one of our chronic problems here, not only in America, but in a lot of first world countries.
In some places, it's increased even higher because there's a lot of local variation.
Hetty Chang at Attendance Work says they define chronic absenteeism as missing 10% of school. Now they're seeing students miss as much as 50% or more.
If you're looking at signs, you start to see it happening. And chronic absence is an early warning sign that kids might not re-enroll the following year.
Like so many, Chang is looking for a solution.
To keep kids in school, to keep kids staying connected, you really need to take what we call a tiered support that invests in prevention.
Experts say growth is possible when families see schools as a place of community beyond the school day, a resource beyond education, but also food and healthcare. Kat Sandoval, Newsy, Chicago.
So their push and their angle to manipulate parents into getting their children back into school and enrolling them is to push this idea and this concept that school isn't just school. It's not just a place that you learn. School is where you can get your health care. And school is where you can get your food. So they're going to feed your children for you and give your children free health care and all these free services and give them this sense of community, this artificial community like we talked about. And then if we can sell them on all of that and just kind of put the learning stuff to the background, then they'll send their kids back to school. If we can bribe the parents pretty much by telling them, we'll feed them for you, we'll take care of them for you, and we'll do all the healthcare stuff for you.
AKA sterilize them all.
Hey, nothing's free in life. I'm just going to say that. So there is a cost to pay. It's a high cost to raise your own children, and you do have to manage that and figure that out for yourself. Any family can do it. If you love your children, if you're watching this video, if you're a good parent, you can do it. There is a way to do it. I promise you, homeschool does not take that many hours in a day at all, and it can be done online. It can be done any way that you want to do it. It can be done by anybody. It doesn't even have to be done by you.
It doesn't even have to be homeschool. You can watch this video up here where we reacted to a grown lady that was an unschooler.
Absolutely.
I think she turned out okay.
Pretty okay, yeah.
Pretty okay.
I think she did too. And it can happen in the car, at the park. It can happen anywhere.
Anywhere.
You can do it. I know you can do it. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
This was super fun. I really enjoyed giving you a problem and then a solution to the problem.
Exactly.
And it just gets me so excited to think about all of the possibilities for not just for our children, but for our country, as we can take back our country with just empowering these young people to just press on and move forward and love learning and seek truth. And this is just wonderful. This is just going in the right direction.
So thank you so much for watching, and we will catch y'all on the next video. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.